Hi, in this video I want to talk about stakeholder relationships and stakeholder management. The book does a sort of minimal job in chapter 1. It identifies what stakeholders are, any group or individual that is influenced by or can influence your company. It talks about the 3 major sort of categories of stakeholders. Let's say really how to deal with them, right? So there have been a couple of models about how to interact with stakeholders. And they come from different ways of thinking about why firms have a social responsibility. So we're back to Michael Porter again. This ideas are from Porter and Kramer, and the slide is actually from a Michael Porter presentation. So this kind of the history of corporate social responsibility and stakeholder relationships I want to talk about briefly. So originally, back in the 30s, there was controversy between Burrell and Means over what the obligations of a corporation to society are. The one side says, corporations have a responsibility to their shareholders only. Managers have a fiduciary responsibility that trumps everything else. They create wealth for shareholders. If shareholders want to do philanthropy, that's great. But managers should leave that up to shareholders. And that's Milton Friedman very famously in the 70s made that case. The alternative is that corporations are created to benefit society. And in fact, most corporate law says that directors and managers should operate for the benefit of the corporation and by implication for society. And that leads to this sort of middle category here, this idea of corporate social responsibility, where firms have a charter and they're sort of expected to comply. You're not a legitimate firm if you violate community standards. And actually, you're not a legitimate corporate actor if you don't go beyond compliance. You want to be a good citizen. You want to contribute to your community. You want to create economic value, but you also want to create social value, social justice, and environmental justice, which leads us to sustainability and the sort of idea of mitigating the harm you create. So an example, Chiquita Brands, which is a big banana company, began by complying with sort of not very difficult standards for chemical use in its plantations. And then it began to try and actually reduce pesticide and fungicide use in its banana plantations, not particularly because it thought that was a thing the community wanted, but because it made good business sense. And started to make sustainability claims for that and got some pushback. Because really all it was doing was mitigating risk. It wasn't resolving risk. It wasn't doing things like being fair to workers as well. So corporate social responsibility and this compliance mentality is where we get the pushback from stakeholders. And that's where stakeholder management happens, right? We want to have relationships with stakeholders where we do what stakeholders expect. And we could actually say, well, this is what you should expect, right? Corporations can advance their own agenda here. And this is what leads to sort of negative interactions with stakeholders. You've got to work out agreement over what's socially responsible means. Recently, Porter and Kramer have been pushing this idea of shared value, where we go beyond the idea of compliance and we say, how does our business model address social needs and challenges? How does our business model, so if I'm Nike, how does my business model address social needs and challenges? And they make this claim because it's actually a good strategy. So if we look at this, for every company, these factors influence productivity, worker education, worker health, quality of life in the community. All of these things are essential to company productivity, so why wouldn't we operate in ways that enhance them? So it's not unusual for business leaders to tell legislatures to support education, for instance, right? And then to actually do things to support education directly. But that's kind of so what, right? The bottom box here is really where shared value happens, right? So if we could meet social needs and treat them as strategic business opportunities, there's a real opportunity for businesses. So the biggest market opportunities out there in a lot of economies are around unmet social needs. If we can figure out a way to do business that meets social and environmental needs, we can have economic, social, and environmental impacts that are favorable and make money.